awesome to be here this afternoon with you. But is it really? I don't know. I'm kind of stressed standing up here. You're all looking at me, I'm feeling the pressure, you know, I'm gonna have to come up with some good stuff in the next 40 minutes. Gonna be scrutinized, right? Kind of like your resumes, right? You're gonna put your life on 1 to 2, perhaps maybe even 3 pages, I don't know. And you're gonna send it out there in the world, and people are gonna look at it and scrutinize you and say, I don't know. Is he good enough? Is she good enough? I don't know. So we're gonna talk about resumes today in just a little bit. And you're going to walk out the door and know everything you need to know about the basics of coming up with a killer resume so you can have a great career, great job, okay? And I heard you already talked about LinkedIn this morning, which is probably even more important than the resume. So just keep that in perspective. But I'd like to start with a little bit of a story. I had the privilege of going to the Pennsylvania Conference for Women on Tuesday. Any of the women get to go to that? No? The largest conference for women in the United States. 12,000 women, picture that, it's crazy, showed up for that. And there were great speakers there. Michelle Obama showed up, and Brene Brown. And if you don't know who Brene Brown is, look her up, she's really wonderful. Wow. So these great speakers showed up, and a couple of the keynotes, they shared stories, and 2 of the keynotes shared the exact same story. So the story was how they met Oprah Winfrey and what that was like the first time to actually go out and meet Oprah Winfrey. And so I thought to myself, wow, wouldn't that be cool to share the story of when I met Oprah Winfrey and how awesome that was with this group. But sadly, I haven't met Oprah Winfrey yet, right? Soon, any day now, right? But I do have another story that I want to share with you, and it's a bit about my journey into the STEM field. Because I did not start out with a STEM major. Did anybody here switch majors before they became engineers? No? You all knew what you were doing? Wow, what a group. Not me. I've been career conflicted my whole life, so I've done a lot of different things. So I started out with one of those, really easy majors. I ended up falling in love with a college, which is Georgetown University. They did not have engineering as a major. But they had a really good language school, so I majored in, what do you think? Pick a language. Was that? English? What was it?
English or Spanish?
English or Spanish? No, pick another one.
French.
French. Yes. So I started out as a French major because I love the school. All the other schools I applied to were for engineering, except for Georgetown. I went in as a French major, right? So I go through my first year, and I did really well because all you're taking is like philosophy, history, all those easy courses, right? And I got to the end of the first year, and I looked at what I had to take year 2, year 3, year 4, and realized it was all reading books, writing papers, reading books, writing papers. Except all the books you're reading were in French, and all the papers that you're writing were in French. So I might as well have been an English major, right? And I said, well, this isn't going to work for me. I can't do this for 3 more years of doing that. But I can't go back to engineering because they don't have engineering unless I want to transfer. I don't really want to do that. What am I going to do? Well, let's look at the other options here. How about physics? Maybe that's close to engineering, right? But there was something really intimidating about physics. I mean, it's like this pure science, and here I am going from being a French major to that. Like, could I even really do that? And luckily, at the end of my dorm hall was a girl, small girl, I'm going to call her Little Louise. And Little Louise was the lone female physics major at Georgetown. And she happened to be a freshman. So I went down to Louise's dorm room, and I said, so Louise, what do you think? I'm transferring over from French, I've been in French the whole year. Do you think I can handle this physics thing, And so Louise looks at me and she says, well, sure, Joanne, I'm doing it. Classes are small, you'll be fine. You should definitely, absolutely major in physics. So, I did all the paperwork. You had to do, it's not easy to switch from a language school over to another school and all that, good stuff that you're aware of. And started my sophomore year as no longer a French major, I'm now physics major, Joanne. And I hadn't taken math for an entire year. So, you don't use that cosine sine stuff on a daily basis. And when you don't, it completely just leaves your memory, right? So, and was taking Calc 1 because I didn't even take calculus in high school, which probably most of you all did. Most of you take calculus in high school. So bear with the story because it's a little hard for you to relate. Okay, so here I was. I didn't have calculus in high school. I had a year off from math, and I'm taking these courses, and I'm doing really badly. I mean, I had like a 45 average or some god-awfully low average like that. And I was basically flunking. I was flunking calculus 1, which of course is, you've got to be good at calculus or physics, right? So this is not going well. So what do you do when you're not doing well in a course? Cry? I just saw that. Well, you go see your professor, right? Because they're there to help you. Your professor's there to help you. So I made an appointment with my professor. I walked down and had a meeting with this guy, and we're sitting down and we're chatting. And he says to me, "So Joanne, what's your major?" And I said, "My major is physics." And there was this really long pause. He looks at me and he goes, "You will never make it in physics. You will never make it. Whatever drove you to be a physics major?" Right? So I said at that point, I've got two options, right? One is to curl into a ball and cry, right? And just say, "You're right, what am I thinking? Who am I? I can't do this. Obviously he knows more than me, right? I can't do this thing." And the other option was to get really, really ticked off, right? Really pissed off and say, "I'm doing fine in my physics courses. Maybe it's just that you're a really crappy teacher, Of course I didn't say this. You don't say this to your professor. But I did. I got really pissed off, and I worked really hard, and was getting through that semester, and took the final. And back in my day, and this is going to be really hard to relate to too, they used to post the final grades up on the door of the classroom. So you actually go to the door, and there's all these people like huddled around, and you make your way through the crowd, and you look down the list, and you find your name, and oh my gosh, I was so excited because I got a D-. just enough to catapult me into calculus 2, right? And so then the rest is history. So I did well in the rest of my classes. I ended up graduating, as a physics major from Georgetown University, and there were a total of 4 of us, because it is not a big science school, right? 4 of us graduated, and I went on after that, and I got a job at Philadelphia Electric in nuclear engineering. Really hated that job. In a nutshell, if you hate your first job, you can get a better second job. So don't let that throw you off, right? Paid me really well. Couldn't pay me enough to do that job. I hated it so much. And luckily at the time, the space shuttle program was kicking off down at Johnson Space Center, Houston. And I got to work down there. I moved and got a job down there, training the astronauts how to use the robot arm on the space shuttle. So that was really, really cool. So you might be wondering, whatever happened to little Louise, right? Little Louise graduated with a friggin' philosophy degree. She dumped me and she went on to philosophy. So I was the lone female who graduated in physics that year. So I share that story because it came up this morning in some of your talks that you really need to have your own sense of who you are and your own confidence, because you are going to run into these naysayers. And maybe you've run into it. Has anybody had that in any of the classes they've taken so far? Questioning your skills or ability? A bit? Yeah. And you might run into it when you get your internship. You might run into it when you get your first job. And for women, you will definitely run into it. I just completed a survey of 100 women who work in STEM across the United States. And 85% of those women experience what's called prove it again, which is having to prove themselves more than their male counterparts, having their expertise questioned, and their success is discounted. So you definitely will run into it, ladies who are in the room. Men, I'm not sure what you're up against, but I'm sure since you're in a scientific, technical field, what we do is we tend to be just critical of one another, in a nutshell. So, be strong to yourself and really hold to that as you go through. Okay, so let's look at this resume stuff, all right? Let's get this going. Okay, we're going to talk about 4 things today. Quickly, these are the 4 things, pretty easy stuff. And before we begin, When you start to create your resume, it's quite an emotional process. You've got to really think about who you are and how you want to frame that resume. And you need to know what you want, what makes you brilliant, all right? And we're going to do an exercise here today. Does everybody have anything to, anybody